Good afternoon, everyone. It is great to see you guys. I'm happy to be here with another list of questions for us to go over. So let's just jump into it. So here we go. All right. The first question comes from Stella Najezic. What do you think successful brands have in common? I own a small sportswear brand in Croatia. General competition in the sports apparel industry is tough. I want to learn what you think I could apply to my strategy from other successful brands. So there is a Harvard professor. Her name is Dr. Frances Fry, and she has a whole I don't know if you want to call it concept, philosophy, strategy, research, whatever you want to say, on on brands and how they uh, are specific to their audience. Like the best brands create like a rabid audience basically, and they do this by not caring about what people who are not fans of the brand think. So one of the examples is IKEA, for example, right? So people who like IKEA really like IKEA, and people who don't like IKEA really don't like IKEA. And IKEA doesn't care. Like they don't care about the people that don't like them. They only care about the people who do. They're very specific in who their audience is and like what they're doing. So I think from my perspective, Apple's kind of the same way, right? Like you either like Apple products. I kind of fall in the middle actually since the iPhone came out. But back in the day when it was just PCs versus Apple computers, I was very much on the PC side. Um, but so same thing, like you create a brand with that has a it means something for the people who are using it. That's the key. It's not just logos and colors and all that sort of stuff, but it's actually like what is the underlying passion that's created. I guess Simon Sinek's Start With Why I guess kind of follows a similar concept. I actually prefer all of Francis Fry stuff over Simon Sinek. So as just a recommendation, I would probably, from my perspective, I would go with the Francis Fry stuff. Let me see what her Francis Fry, I can't remember what the name of her book is. Harvard book. I think it's called, I can't remember what it is. Anyway, her last name is spelled Frey, and she's got a couple of books out now. Yeah, Unleash the Unapologetic Leader's Guide to Empowering Everyone Around You. So it's more specific to individuals. Uncommon Service, that's the one I was thinking of. So Uncommon Service is uh, a great book by her. Okay, so anyway, so from a brand perspective, know who your audience is, know why they like you, and don't care if other people don't like you. You don't have to be something. You don't have to be everything to everyone. You just have to be really great for whoever it is that you're trying to be part of, or like part of their lives, part of their existence, part of who they are. That's the way to approach it. All right, second question. Stella Najezic again. If it is not only paid ads and email marketing, what else do you think I could do so more people find out about my brand? I own a small sportswear brand in Croatia that has been on the market for 18 months. I run ads and have a new email marketing strategy. What else can I do to reach new buyers? So, whenever you're, in my experience, and maybe it's because they have never been the best digital guy in the world, I have found much more success in PR type activities, in kind of infiltrating groups of people and getting them excited about whatever it is that I'm doing, and whatever my product is, if it's a product. Like for example, I mean, like kind of a big obvious example is the big hot dog that I started. It was a kind of a joke business that I started just on a whim. I had another business. I had live theater venues, and we had a PR department in Chicago. And so I was like, how can I use this PR department to sell a product? Because we've never used it to sell a product. We've only used the show to sell live shows. And so I basically said, okay, let's take PR and apply it to an e-commerce product, which was Big Hot Dog. If you go to bighotdog.com, you can still see the website. It's still up. We don't sell them anymore, but you can still see some of the stuff. And we basically took a funny shtick of an idea and kind of promoted it out to radio shows and television and all those folks. And because it was kind of silly and interesting, people picked up on it. And that was our whole entire marketing strategy, was on the PR side of things. Then we also went to Guinness Book of World Records, and so the got into the Guinness Book of World Records, whatever year that was. Might have been like 2013 or something like that, if I remember correctly. So my marketing kind of brand growth experience is more around kind of direct connections to an audience through by interacting with them in some way, whether it's through a medium like television or radio, or even if it's direct connections, conferences and events and all that sort of stuff I like a lot too. So if you're not doing that stuff, there's nothing wrong with trying to build a business grassroots from the ground up by actually interacting with real people. There's so much focus on digital that a lot of times there's money left on the table because there's these other things to explore that people are not exploring as much, or at least not in as great a volume. Cool. Eric Blondino. Do I need, and what are pros and cons of having both personal and or business credit as a business owner? How could I use credit for my benefit? I haven't owned a credit card since 1998. I have bootstrapped my business from the beginning. If I need to buy a vehicle, equipment, materials, coaching, or invest in a new team member, I need to make sales and save. If I don't have the money, then I can't afford it, is the mentality I was raised with. At what point in the entrepreneur journey is credit recommended to grow a business? How does one utilize credit for growth? We currently at $400,000 a year, and what perks could I benefit from by using credit cards or lines of credit? Rat exclusion service, we're in the business of getting people at homes back from the invasion of rats. All right, Eric. So here, this is a good question. This is actually a really big philosophical question. Is debt bad? Right. So kind of as regular consumers who buy stuff, the idea of debt is a bad thing. Because a lot of times as regular old consumers, if you're just taking out debt to consume things, then debt is a very bad thing, and it doesn't really get people anywhere in life and just costs them and makes their lives miserable. But debt can be a very good thing if, in fact, debt is the second cheapest, the middle cost of the three ways in which you raise money in which you grow your business, right? So the three things to raise money and to grow a business are, it starts with cash flow. If your business makes enough money that you can just reinvest that cash flow into the business to make it grow, that's the cheapest thing to do because it's basically free money at that point. It's your own money that the business earned, so you just invest it. The second most expensive, or second cheapest, whichever way you want to look at it, is debt. So debt is a very preferable growth mechanism. And then the third is equity. A lot of times people think equity is the cheapest. Equity is not the cheapest. Equity is actually the most expensive, because if somebody gives you money, and they think it's the cheapest because they don't have to pay it back, but if the business succeeds, it's very expensive because now you're going to be paying that equity portion forever. And sometimes that's the right thing to do, and sometimes equity partners are great. Don't get me wrong, I have a lot of them. But you have to be, when you're thinking of how you're going to invest or how you're going to bring money into your business, just know that equity is the most expensive. And again, sometimes that makes sense. So my point is that you should not be afraid of debt. You should think of debt as a good thing. Now, I say that with that. If you think back to what I said about the consumer debt, you don't want your business to be to act like a consumer using debt, right? So if you're taking on debt through the business, whether you're signing for it personally or in your business, and frankly, in all of our size businesses, it's all going to be you anyway. There's no such thing as business credit. I mean, there is, but you're going to personally guarantee it anyway. So it's basically your credit. At least at this stage, you got to get a lot bigger, and I mean like a lot bigger, like $10 million in enterprise value or better, and like have some really good relationships with banks before they stop asking you for personal guarantees. So it's basically all on you anyway. So when you consider debt, you have to make sure that you're using the debt in a way that is risk managed. You don't want to just use it to buy stuff and like, oh, we'll see what happens. Like, I'm going to run a bunch of Google ads and see if I can make money off of it. Well, that doesn't work, because now if you lose the money, then now you owe the money, and now you're paying interest on the money, and you can get into a debt cycle, which then just takes you and the business out. So you want to make sure that when you are investing with debt, that you're buying things that are fairly sure thing to grow the business. Like, if you're buying equipment, it's great to use debt, because equipment you can potentially sell and at least get some of the money back. If you're buying trucks, great. If you're buying real estate, great. These are all great things to use debt with. So yeah, I would not say that if you don't have the money you shouldn't grow, because no business grows like that. All businesses grow by bringing in outside money, whether it's debt or equity. So you will, if you want to grow the business, you will have to do that at some point in some way. But in identifying what your constraint is in the business is really key, because it's that constraint that's going to make the biggest impact. So if you're investing dollars into that constraint, the thing that's really holding you back, and not any peripheral stuff, then you should see growth because you put that money in. So that's something to be aware of. All right. Jonathan Jean Baptiste. How do I determine what type of life insurance I should have? I am a residential real estate agent. I'm looking to maximize my money for future investments. I hear life insurance is a way, but I'm not sure what type will work best for me. Do you view life insurance as an investment vehicle, or how do you view it, and how do I know if it's appropriate for me? Yeah, so there's a couple. By no means am I a life insurance expert. There's a couple. There's obviously the two main types of life insurance, right? You've got term life insurance and whole life insurance. Term life insurance is it's like car insurance basically. You're just paying money, and every month that you don't die, then you just paid the money and you helped pay out somebody else's premium who did die, right? Or or whatever. So that's just money out the door. You lock in that rate over a 20-year period. That's the cheapest thing to do, and that gives you the maximum amount of coverage in the short term for the least amount of money. The general rule of thumb that I've always had through my whole career is that if I add up all of my good debt, all of my debt that is producing me income. Now that's a concept, right? That your debt produces your income, but it should be if you're risk managed and using it right. So I would add up all my debt, and then I make sure that I always have enough term life insurance to at least cover my debts. So that if I died, then my wife and my son they would get basically a giant income boost, because all of that debt would go away, and then all those payments would become basically cash flow to them. So it's a little perk there. You can go into whole life insurance, which is a much more complicated product, and depending on your specific situation and how you're going to use it, there's like a bunch of different ways to approach that. It is more costly, and in fact it's more costly in that I wouldn't recommend going into a whole life program unless you have an actual expert who is guiding you and planning out why you're using it. Because otherwise you're just probably getting a low interest rate on your investment, where you could take that cash and invest it somewhere else, and then just buy a term life insurance policy to cover the life insurance part of it. Whole life, you actually make a cash investment and it still has cash value, and you kind of get a return on that money. But you can make other investments and buy term life and create the same thing on your own. You don't need the whole life insurance for that. Again, unless you've got an actual tax attorney or somebody like that who's an expert who is structuring this in a way that it becomes like a really useful vehicle. So if you don't have anything, start with the term life insurance. It's a good place to start. That would be my thought. Or if you want to speak with somebody who's really an expert in this space, I have a couple different folks that I can refer you to. Just reach out. All right, Kimberly Benjamin. How do I determine direct pricing versus wholesale pricing? As a hairstylist, my products retail direct to clients. Are there products I purchase at wholesale that I would like to turn around and wholesale to the other stylists for them to sell? How do I determine what margin should be for me and they can make money selling it to their clients, but I also make a margin? My advantage is I can buy at higher volumes to getting better pricing from wholesalers than they get. Okay, cool. All right, here's something to think about. This is a great question. Here's something to think about whenever you're thinking about pricing in kind of like a value chain like that, is there's only this much value in this whole like chain of transactions, right? You've got the guy who produced it. Let's just to keep it simple. You've got the guy who you're buying from, and then he has it from, probably he's buying it from the manufacturer, right? So you have a manufacturer at this level, you have a distributor at this level, you have you, and then you have your retail, stylists who are going to sell it at retail to somebody else. So you have those four people all lined up. Within that value chain, there's a spread between the manufacturer and the amount the customer is willing to pay at the top, right? So if that's $20 and it's only $20 that's going to come out of it, and then let's say it costs $2 to make the thing. So there's $18 worth of gross profit from the time the thing's produced to the time that it's bought at retail. That's all anyone is dealing with within that kind of deal. So depending on where and how much you come into it, like you're saying, you can buy it at a higher volume, so you're able to presumably buy from your distributor cheaper than an individual would be able to on their own, like an individual stylist. Then you're saying you can capture more of that because the distributor is willing to give up more of his because you're buying at a higher volume. It really just, there is no like proper margin, as it were. It really does come down to how much of that can you capture yourself? How much of that you're competitive with your distributor and you're competitive with the people you're selling to. And this is true of everyone, right? We're really competitive with the people on either side of us in that equation because we have to make sure there's enough for us in there, right? Because if there isn't, it's not worth doing. Or what ends up happening sometimes is people bypass each other, right? So maybe the manufacturer decides, we don't need the distributor anymore. We can just go right to the stylist and cut those two people out and then share a bigger chunk just between two instead of splitting it by four. So that math is happening all the time in the background. So to answer your question, what's the proper margin? It's frankly as much as you can get. You just have to keep in mind that you also have to, you can be greedy about it and say, I want as much as I can get, but you also have to be aware that there's a point where the distributor's not willing to supply you at that price, and there's a point where your stylist, your customer, is not willing to pay any more than that. So it's a game trying to maximize those two elements. How cheap can you buy it, and how high can you sell, and how much of that margin can you capture up on the top side, where the stylist says, okay, cool. When I sell it at retail and I make 20% markup, I'm happy with it. But if I make 10, I'm not even going to bother with it. I'm going to go buy another product. So you really have to think about it from be as greedy as possible when you set your margins, but you also have to be thinking in terms of what does the other side of the equation, so that they're maximally interested in still doing the deal, right? Like that's what you're trying to figure out. You're trying to get as much as you can while still keeping their perspective in mind, so that you can give them what they need to do the deal in the first place, and not just say, I'll sell a different product because I make better margins on that one. So it's kind of like there's no set answer, I guess, is what I'm getting at. It's good to think about these things kind of at a high level, and then you could just boil it down and see what you can get. All right, next question. Lena Kalinsky. Should I be sending caviar as marketing strategy to big names that reach out to me inquiring about caviar? We specialize in black caviar and other exclusive items. Recently, A.J. Dillon, running back for the Green Bay Packers, reached out to us about caviar, but did not go through with ordering. I was wondering if it would be a good idea to send him the caviar as a gift in hopes to earn his trust and gain the relationship with him. similar to how nowadays brands will send influencers and celebrities PR packages in exchange for IG posts, TikTok videos, etc. Please advise things. All right. Cool. Great. That's a good question. Try it, right? It's all just marketing at that point. It's all just a question of, are these, is the marketing spend worth the result that it gets? Who knows? If you send out, a caviar package to AJ Dillon and he responds and buys something, maybe that's a good strategy, or maybe it was just a one-off. Who knows? Whenever you're doing any type of marketing, you need to know what it cost you, and you got to know what the result is. And then you just kind of play that game until you find something that costs you less than what you end up making based on the result. So, honestly, going back to kind of maybe some earlier comments that I've made, doing marketing that is not normal, that everybody does, automatically, in my opinion, gives you a leg up, because at least you're breaking out of all the white noise and all the other things that people are getting distracted by, and they're stopping and noticing you, right? So if that costs you a little bit more money, or it costs you a little bit more time, like per interaction, if the positive outcome of that is that somebody, at least in volume, pays more than nothing, because if they didn't buy, they didn't buy, then it's worth the effort. So the main thing is plan it and track it. If you don't plan it and track it, you're never really going to know if it actually works and if you could scale it up. So, interesting idea. Let me know how it goes if you try it. All right, I think that's it. I've only got the 2 pages today, and I went through them. So good to see everybody. Reach out to me if you want us to talk about anything specific. I'm always happy to speak with people and hear what they've got cooking. All right, have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.